Yeah.
Just let me get my notes.
Yeah, sure, no rush, no rush. I can leave them up. Secondary school in.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yes.
Now I don't.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very great. Okay, folks, let's get started. You're all very welcome to the Southeast Technological University European Parliament Hustings event. As we meet here today on April 19th, the biggest exercise in democracy is starting today. The Indian elections, with almost 1 billion people, are starting their electoral process, which will run for 6 weeks and will involve 15 million election officials processing the results. The second biggest election in the world is the European Parliament elections. It's a parliament that has been growing in power for a number of decades, that has had direct elections since 1979. The European Union produces around about 60% or derives legislation that operates 60% of the laws operating in Ireland, and when you look at business and trade legislation, that figure rises to about 80%. The European Parliament has co-decision powers over that, and will elect 720 MEPs in June from across the 27 states from a population of about 450 million people. However, turnout and the democratic turnout for elections was in continuous decline since 1979 on each election, bottoming out at about 42% in 2014. Thankfully, at the last election in 2019, there was an upsurge to about 50% turnout, and that was largely fueled by youth participation. Under 25s increased by 14 points in the 2019 election, so we want to encourage more participation by under 25s. However, in Ireland, the turnout in 2019 declined by 2%, so we must make sure that we protect the voting process. Democracy is more than just voter turnout, though. It's about civic engagement and public participation. In a year when more people in history, more than 2 billion people, will have the chance to vote in elections this year, from the US, Trump versus Biden, the sequel, to potential elections in the UK, and even perhaps here in Ireland, it is vital that we have an informed citizenry about the issues before them. And Freedom House organisation tells us that democracy, political rights and civil liberties have been in decline across the world for the last 17 years in a row. So it's vital that we tend to and nurture the fragility of the democratic process. We must guard against misinformation, disinformation, and those who seek to undermine the political institutions and electoral process. Democracy and freedom can never be taken for granted. A new survey this week tells us that 90% of Irish people feel that membership of the European Union has been good for the country. That's way above the EU average of 71%. So we're in a good position in terms of people's trust and awareness of the European Union. This year, Ireland will elect 14 MEPs, an increase of 1 since 2019. Ireland South will elect 5 candidates, 5 MEPs for the next 5-year term of office. And there's a very heavy agenda on the next term coming in, from climate change to migration, artificial intelligence, demographic change, geopolitical tensions and potential conflict with Russia, a very precarious Middle East, and the rise of authoritarian and indeed anti-democratic forces both without and within the EU itself. So my role here today is to chair the discussion and to listen, and I would again thank you for your attention, your attendance, as we all listen, hopefully with open minds, curiosity and respect for the speakers who are going to be engaging with you today. The format of the event is that I will ask each speaker to speak for 5 minutes, and then we'll invite questions from the audience. I will be timing the candidates. I'll give them a notice after about 4.5 minutes in order that they respect each other's time allocation. Unfortunately, Professor Niamh Hourigan from the Labour Party had an emergency meeting in Limerick and can't join us this morning, and she sends her apologies. I'd just like to acknowledge the deputies, David Cullinan, Mark O'Cassick, for attending. And I'd also just give a special shout out to Caelan Walsh from De La Salle College. Where's Caelan? Over here. He won the EU soapbox competition for secondary school students just before Christmas, which I chaired. So from De La Salle College, Caelan Walsh. So the speakers, and they tell me that they don't mind who goes first, so we'll take them in the order that they're sitting, I think, if that's okay. So I'll invite Grace O'Sullivan to address you first, and then Kathleen Funchion, and then Cynthia Niamh and John Mullins, and they will introduce themselves. So finally, as Mary Robinson, our former president, reminded us earlier this week, you're never too young to lead, and you're never too old to learn. So I'll hand you now to Grace.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Jerry, for hosting this event. It's very important. It gives everyone an idea of the work of the politicians and the ambition in relation to going to Europe. My name is Grace O'Sullivan. I'm a member of the European Parliament for the last 5 years, and prior to that I was member of Shanna Dairn, the Senate. And I suppose my background is as like an old activist. I went to sea when I was 20 with an organisation called Greenpeace, and I joined that organisation as a volunteer. So it's an NGO. And I spent 10 years with the organisation at sea, sailing all around the world, drawing attention to environmental abuses in terms of the green agenda. And then in terms of the peace, green peace. The peace was peace and justice. So I've been on this pathway a long time, pushing the green agenda and pushing peace and justice in all areas of work I've been involved in. So for years I was the lawbreaker, and now I'm the lawmaker. Since being elected to the European Parliament, I have focus my attention on legislation around the environment. So today is a very special day for me. It's the Global Climate Action Day. So it's to recognise that climate change is happening. It took us years to push through the denial. So that climate change is happening, and we have to do something about that. And do you know what? It offers us a load of opportunities. So the laws I've been involved in, the 8th Environment Action Programme to 2030, in the European Union, where I was the chief negotiator for the European Parliament, so all of the different groups in the Parliament, its priority areas are to set a pathway for the European Union on climate adaptation, mitigation, the decline in biodiversity, to look at circular economy, and to look at production and consumption and create the legislations that would give us the pathway to 2030 in line with the Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 21. And remember that Antonio Guterres, the head of the United Nations, he said, this is our decade of change. So this, from 2020 to 2030, if we don't make transformative changes, we are going to breach, so push beyond the tipping points of the earth. So the legislation that I helped get through in the Parliament, it looked at things like soil, that we need to look at soil in terms of health and quality. In the European Union, before 2019, there was no legislation on soil. So there were directives on air, water, but nothing on soil. So I got a commitment from the European Commission to bring in legislation to govern healthy soil. That was introduced and passed last July. So the very earth we live on now in the European Union has a baseline, because it's not as ambitious as I would have liked, to work towards healthy soil, because we need it for food, we need it for carbon sequestration, we need it for water, and so many other things. The other thing I brought in, and Deputy Marco Kosick is here, and something he works on a lot up in the Oireachtas, is that we move beyond GDP. So GDP as a model, an economic model, is it's a race to the bottom. Production at any cost. Who cares about the environment? So I brought in language in the legislation in the EU that says that we move beyond GDP towards a well-being economies that recognise people and the planet first. So it's another bit I'm very proud about. But everything we do and everything I do is always looking at people. And looking at people in terms of security, in terms of abilities, so that we bring everyone with us and we respect the principles of social justice. So it's not about bringing one stream of people, but all people with us. So that's who I am, that's what I'm about. I'm from Tramore, County Waterford. I coach surfing on a Sunday morning still. I love the fact that I love what I'm doing, and I'm very proud that I am Waterford's only ever raised, bred and living in the city, or well, in Tramore, in the county. So I love my country, I love my Daisha. So thanks very much for listening.
John?
Majumwa, Dave Galir, this morning no, dom ça va Bort Larga, Madin Cho. C'est avec grand plaisir que je suis ici à Waterford. I had to say that clearly because I'm running for Europe and I do speak a bit of French. Can I just say, Jerry, thank you very much for facilitating this, and to Tom as well, and to everybody in your faculty. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak, and wish my fellow candidates the very best in the election ahead as well. Can I also acknowledge Deirdre Clune MEP, who's been a stalwart in Irish politics for many, many years and has represented my home city very well over that period, and is now stepping back from the European Parliament, and we wish you the very best, Deirdre, as you do that. Look, a bit of background on myself. I'm a first-time politician in my mid-50s. I'm somebody who was born in Cork in a 2 up, 2 down, lived in council estates right across the city in Knocknaheeny, which certainly has its challenges, and also in an area called Leesdale in Bishopstown in the west of the city. Fortunately, I went to a good school. I went to Gael College de Vera on Vannistrahuig, so I was a hurler, and on the weekend that we have this weekend, clearly Cork are coming down to Waterford, and we're hopeful that we will do well, but you never know when Davy Fitz is the coach of a team, but certainly looking forward to that. I'm an engineer. I studied engineering, did a master's in engineering, and I have an MBA from Smurfit Business School. And when I was your age, I was involved in Young Fine Gael, and I was president of Young Fine Gael in 1993. So I'm not new to politics. I've been on the executive council of Fine Gael, and I've been the director of elections for various candidates for over that 30 years. I set up a business after being chief executive of Bord Gáis, where I brought in the big switch, and I also brought in, because of my background, free prepayment meters for people who were struggling during the big bust of 2008, 2009. They could move to Pinergy and prepay power. Only for that policy that would not have existed. The big switch created a discounting on electricity for the first time, and we rolled that right across the country. I was chairman of Port of Cork for 8 years. I'm very versed in getting European funding and applying it to infrastructure. I built power plants all over Europe. I founded Amarenco, which is a solar company. And by the way, in 2016, we put the largest rooftop in Ireland here in the old WIT, now SETU, on the engineering block. It was 40 kilowatts. And my company is investing 70 million euros in West Waterford in solar farms in Modeligo and also in Kilcannon. So I have a history of delivery in business. And I also believe I am somebody who is clearly multilingual, somebody who has set up businesses all over Europe. We have offices, about 4 offices in France, office in Porto, an office in Madrid, an office in Vienna. I deal with politics right across Europe and certainly have a deep understanding of issues around climate change and in particular issues around energy. So in terms of understanding climate change, we have a massive challenge, and I think Grace alluded to it, in terms of what we have to do in this country to meet our targets by 2030. And certainly there are real challenges around electric vehicles, around renewable energies. And one of the real opportunities for us is to go offshore. And there's some fantastic wind speeds that are available to us off the coast of Waterford, off the coast of Wexford, off the coast of Cork and off the coast of Wicklow. And in fact, I was involved in the only offshore wind farm in Arklow when it was built, 25 megawatts, back in the early 90s. So I have a history of dealing with that particular industry, and I believe I'm somebody who in Europe can help the Irish industry grow from strength to strength and be a 20 billion turnover industry in the 2040s. So that history of delivery is something that if I say I'm going to do something, it will be done. It's black or it's white. It's never particularly grey for me, although people say to me in politics, you have to have an element of greyness attached to that. My priorities, clearly, I believe, by the way, in Ireland, farmers are being demonised. I believe, by the way, motorists are being demonised, even though they're trying to convert to hybrids and electric vehicles. I believe fisheries, we now have an opportunity with a reform of the common fisheries policy to actually get a better deal for our fishermen right across the south coast and the east coast. Clearly, in terms of climate change, I will be an advocate for that, as all of the candidates, I've no doubt, will be in terms of Europe. And on foreign policy, I have a business in Jordan. I was in Jordan 3 days after the Hamas attack. And I can believe you, I understand the depth of feeling in that particular region, in Jordan and also in Egypt, where our company set up a business. What I will say to you is that Ireland has to be for Palestine. It has to recognise, and the rest of Europe have to recognise Palestine. And also, by the way, we will continue to stand with Ukraine. I ask you for your support during these European elections. Good Míle Magh.
Thank you, John. Cynthia?
Díobh, is mór an nóir dom a bheithan seo I bhfuil láthir maidin nó an pranóna, is ionta go deo an deisio áil chun mé héana chur an uail, agus ag deireadh na diaspóireachta seo tásúlagam go dtí sibh cad a seasam agus cad tá inán san Europe riamhse má thugann sibh an bhóta dom. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Can I say a massive thank you to the organisers of today's event and, of course, our chairperson, Jerry Arthurs. I've been a member of the governing body of SETU for some time, and I'm immensely proud of my involvement with this wonderful university. The progress that it has made for the region and for the entire southeast area has been phenomenal. Last January, I had the distinct honour of being invited by the chairperson of the governing body, Professor Prendergast, and also by the Uachtaráin of this Coláiste, Professor Campbell, to give out the degrees on conferring day, and it was the most rewarding day to date, I have to say, in my professional career, to see such a wide diversity of courses and graduates. And the sheer diversity and inclusivity of the students was amazing, and the welcoming atmosphere in this university. Ismisha Cynthia Niwarachu. Je m'appelle Cynthia. I am a former teacher. I am a former journalist and a broadcaster, and I am currently a family lawyer, a barrister for many years. I'm married to John. I have 2 adult children, or we do, Rachel and David. And we are both self-employed and we're both hard grafters. In fact, all 4 of us are. I live in Carlow, just on the edge of town in Oak Park. It's a rural region. I'm surrounded by farmers, but I've got the benefit of a very healthy provincial town around me. I'm running in this election, Achorda, because I feel at this point in my life, I can contribute. I can contribute to improving and shaping a better future for young people, for older people, for middle-aged people, couples, separated, divorced, married. It doesn't matter what persuasion you are. I think I can contribute to the betterment and improvement of your lives on a wider scale. Let's talk about Horizon Europe funding. The Horizon Europe EU fund is particularly important for SETU. It's the EU's key funding programme for research and innovation. It has a budget of 95.5 billion. It's an extension of the Horizon 2020 programme, and the fund is designed to drive research and innovation, be that in terms of climate change initiatives or advancement in agricultural technology or other sectors. I will fight on your behalf to ensure that this university gets those funding streams and gets that money, because not only as a member of the governing body but also as your representative, I want this region to flourish. I want the South East to be put on the map of Europe. I don't want all the money being channelled into Dublin or southwards into Cork and Kerry, although they're within the South constituency in which I'm seeking election. I will be banging on the table for more funding for this part of Ireland South. Ultimately, this funding will allow SETU to expand their remit and expand their research and their innovation, which is so exemplary, and all the capabilities that it has, so that we can grow the South East. Why? Because you and I and anybody else watching here this morning, we live and we work in the South East. We raise families, we mind elderly parents or elderly adults. We want our communities to thrive. It doesn't matter whether you're working or not working, or whether you're involved in one job or another. We all want our families to thrive and to have a choice to live and stay here. Let's talk about investment in key infrastructure in the South East. Waterford Airport, Airport Forthlariga. The last scheduled commercial services were in 2016 with VLM Airlines. A joint 12 million private investment venture has been announced and will facilitate the return of commercial flights into the airport for the first time in 7 years. The money will be primarily used, as you probably know, to extend the runway. A business plan is being submitted to the Department of Transport, and there's a bid to secure match funding from the government. And I'm calling on Minister Eamon Ryan and the Greens not to stand in the way of this. We need connectivity in this region. This investment could see a London route opened up within the next year or so, connecting all of us, all of you who want to do business, who want to have see families abroad, and who want to make connections and live and work. You can then get to the rest of the world and not have to travel to Dublin. Waterford Airport is understood to have engaged with preliminary talks with Ryanair, and the Ryanair services out of Waterford could also drive tourism. The South East is a wonderful area to holiday in. I know, because I've holidayed in every county from Carlow, and I can tell you we need more tourism, funding for tourism, but we need infrastructure for that. Good roads, good flights in and out, good ports, etc. So there are those who argue that the airport was loss-making, but I would say that 71% of airports with less than 1 million passengers per year across Europe are in the red. So why do we need to drive our regional airports? Because Dublin is bursting at the seams. Dublin has 40% of our population, and any loss-making airline that needs to be subsidised with state funding has a social benefit to each and every one of us, to the community, and, as I said, to tourism. Farir focal scar. I have much more to say, but perhaps nuair a hagan na ceistení is féidir liom díreú ábhar eile atá faoi chabad agam. A chuirde, we face many changes. Regional wars, aggressive powers and global instability. They all mean that we have considerable work to do in Brussels and to ensure that the South East is not left behind. I want to be the safe and steady pair of hands for you. I want to be the capable and confident but also caring pair of hands to represent you in Brussels. Agus má thugann si bhan vóta dom, berim is buail a chéile.
Thank you, Cynthia and Kathleen.
Thanks very much to Jerry and to Tom, and good morning everyone, and thanks everyone for giving their time to be here as well this morning. As I said, I'm Kathleen Funch and I'm one of 2 Sinn Féin candidates running here in Ireland South, along with my colleague Senator Paul Gavin in the Limerick side of the constituency. So I am from Kilkenny originally, living in Kilkenny still, mother of 2 boys, Emmett and Finn. I used to work for the trade union SETU, and between local level at council and Dáil level I have 15 years elected experience, first elected in 2009. I actually ran for the European election in 2009 as well at that time, but was unsuccessful. So the first thing I want to say is, I think when people are running for a local election, or when there's a local or a general election on, sometimes people feel a little bit more connected to those elections and to those candidates, because you can really see a very clear path in how the correlation affects your life. The European election can be a little bit abstract for people at times, and I do understand that. I think it's really important that people understand how important the European elections are, how a lot of our legislation actually originates in Europe, how it's really important that we have the correct people there scrutinising and looking at that legislation, and where it's good and positive for Ireland, that we're fighting for that, where it isn't, that people are not afraid to call that out. So I think it's really important that we elect MEPs that have the correct political values. And for me, that's somebody that has a commitment to more investment in our public services. We've seen the effects of when things are privatised right throughout Europe. We've seen the effects when we don't have adequate public services. I'm sure everybody here knows somebody in the middle of a housing crisis at the moment, or knows somebody that's choosing to leave the country, not because they can't get work, but because they don't ever feel they have the opportunity to own a home, or someone that's struggling with the cost of living in terms of bills coming in the door, trying to decide, do you pay your gas this week, do you pay your electricity? These are very real problems for people. Health as well, and the disability sector that I feel very passionate about. So many people, particularly children with additional needs, are really being failed and left behind. So I think it's really important that we have people elected at all levels that actually want to be a very strong voice for all of those communities. I also think we need really strong representation for the South East. You know, we have been left behind over the last number of years. We know any reports that come out in relation to the South East in terms of unemployment or deprivation rates were always higher, and I think it's really important that we have our fair share of all of this. We're obviously talking about a European election, so that means being part of a wider community, a wider group. And I think we know that it's more important now than ever when we see some of the stuff that's happening on an international level in terms of some of the wars. You know, climate change has been spoken about here. We need to not just tackle climate change, but we also need to look at some of the root causes as to why that's happening in terms of, you know, deforestation and other things like that I'm sure we'll get into in the questions and answers. But just to say that they are really important parts to the whole European project as well. So I'm not going to say too much more. I think it's much better when there's a bit of a debate in terms of questions and answers. Just to say thanks again to people for being here, and I very much look forward to the questions. And the one commitment I can give is I've always worked extremely hard over the past 15 years of being elected. I'm involved with Sinn Féin for the last 21 years. I would really love the opportunity to bring that experience to Europe, and as I say, have somebody that's willing to scrutinise where that's needed, that's willing to fight for the good things when they're there, because there has been some really good stuff that has come from Europe. As someone that worked in the trade union movement previously, a lot of our workers' rights legislation originated in Europe, so there is positives as well. Unfortunately, over the last few years, I would say maybe 10 years, we've seen it's become a lot more negative at a European level, and the focus and the switch is changing, and we need to get that focus back on people and on communities and on families. And thanks very much, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you to all 4 candidates. Now to the fun part. We invite questions, and the candidates have agreed to maybe take 2 or 3 questions as a collective. And when you're asking your questions, can you just say who you are, your name and where you're from, and please keep it to the point with regard to questions so that we can accommodate as many as possible within that time frame. So we have about a half an hour, 40 minutes. Anybody? Okay, first name, first hand up.
My name is Derek Bly. I'm actually a candidate for the EU elections. The point I'd like to make is that all of the speakers, they mentioned the failings of previous MEPs, right, up to now, right, and they want to improve, right, on those failings. With a heavily stacked establishment ticket here today, right, and with all of your party's polls plummeting at the moment, why do you think that you can make any difference going forward in Europe when your parties have failed so miserably up to now?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, Colette.
I'm Colette Coffer. I'm a lecturer here and I'm a history in journalism. Unfortunately, I have a contentious issue to bring up. The CAS report was published last week in England on the treatment of children with gender identity issues. Dr. Paul Moore of the National Gender Services here has described it as the most important event in the development of gender healthcare globally to date. The report essentially found that poor research and a toxic vitriolic debate has led to unsafe services and practices in the treatment of children with gender dysphoria. The need for a proper evidence-based approach is clear to me. I think we need a compassionate approach to people with gender identity issues, and I would ask you to answer, what's your own approach to gender identity issues? Thank you.
Okay. Okay, do you want to deal with those two first?
Yes, I don't mind dealing with the point that Derek made in relation to the speakers thus far pointing out the failures of MEPs to date. I certainly didn't point out failures. I pointed out that there are umpteen streams of funding in the European Union that we can benefit by. Since we joined the European Union in 1973, this country has been revolutionised, not just in terms of the farming sector, but in terms of every sector. And you've heard the speakers talking about the improvement in employment rights, consumer rights, business rights, etc. We have benefited by 0.8 of a billion every year of inward investment into this country. Waterford Glass is a perfect example, the visitor centre, of European money. We also have a wonderful road to travel on between Waterford and Dublin so that we can have proper, safe connectivity. That's thanks to EU funding. And just in relation to examples of where Fianna Fáil and the government have been successful in bringing foreign direct investment that is so badly needed in this area, I just jotted down last night in preparation for this. In May 22, we have Public Relay, the US communications analytics and advisory company, and they located here. We also have InfoC BPM in Waterford. We've Bausch and Lomb. We have Trilateral Research Limited. There's just 4 examples of the success of Fianna Fáil policies to date in this region. I could go on in terms of Wexford, Carlow, Kilkenny, but I won't. So sorry, there hasn't been an abject failure. I absolutely disagree with Derek that we have pointed out any failure on the part of MEPs to date. In fact, the MEPs to date, and certainly my sitting colleague Billy Kelleher and Barry Andrews in Dublin, they have done extremely well in benefiting their respective regions from EU funding. And that's what I will be doing in the EU to improve the lives of everybody.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, sure.
Grace?
Yeah, thank you very much.
You can just use this.
Oh, great. Thank you. So thanks for the questions. I'll address both of them if that's okay. So Derek, I've been a member of the European Parliament since 2019. I'm part of the Green Group in the European Parliament, which is quite interesting to see where the different MEPs, which groupings they go into. But the Green Group has been instrumental in setting the green agenda in terms of climate change, biodiversity decline, in terms of recognising that the way we're living, we can improve. So in terms of circularity, in terms of recycling, issue I worked on, packaging waste regulation, we acknowledge in Europe, the 27 member states, 450 million citizens, that the trajectory of waste that we're accumulating is just going upward trend. So I've been working on the legislation to reduce that. So it's not that when we go to over to Brussels, very often people think, kind of out of sight, out of mind. I can assure you, I haven't been out of sight, because I've made sure that I've balanced over the 5 years getting out in the constituency. So I'm an ecologist by training. I believe that in order to understand what's going on in the community, it's important to engage with the community and all ages, all sectors. So over the last 5 years, short of COVID, I've been out about and learning as much from the ground in order to bring back into Brussels and into Strasbourg, where we work on the legislation, the technical aspects, so deep diving into legislation to try to create the best conditions for people across the European Union. So you're working, obviously, my heart is always here at home, because this is, the Southeast is really important to me, and the region that, so I, as an MEP, we cover 12 counties. Now, the boundaries have changed, so it'll be slightly less. But the thing is that you do represent the people of your constituency, and how to do that best is to get out and about, talk to people, and then see how you can bring that into the legislation. And then, Colette, in terms of gender health care, the Green Group in the European Parliament, without a shadow of doubt, is probably most progressive in this regard. We are, as an ecologist, the principles are diversity is strength. And everything's interrelated and interconnected. So I have colleagues, I'm part of 70 members in the European Parliament, and we have the youngest MEP and probably the oldest, Margrethe Auken from Denmark. But we, are a group in the Parliament that is working very strongly on gender rights, because we believe that diversity is strength. We have to live, find ways to live and work together in our communities, whether it's my little community down in Tremor, or whether it's the community of Ireland South, or if it's across Europe. So I'm happy to talk to you at any stage if you think I can help you, if I am lucky enough to be re-elected. Thank you.
Kathleen?
Yeah, thanks very much. So I think that if you look at all levels, whether it's local level, national level or EU level, people do feel like they've been failed, and people are very, very frustrated. And certainly that's what we're hearing on the doors in terms of, as some of the stuff I had said, I don't want to repeat myself, in housing and healthcare and all of the various issues. I mean, at times the list is endless, the stuff that people are battling for that should be available as a basic human right, for example, having a roof over your head. So for me, no one will be surprised here to see that I would be arguing that we need to have a Sinn Féin government. For us, that means having really strong Sinn Féin representation at local level and at European level as well, at all levels. So to keep that message right across, and that it is about families, and it is about people, and it is about community, because that is how the European Union was first created, and that's why it sort of came about. And there has been some fantastic things. I mentioned the workers' rights legislation, but we also, I'm the children's spokesperson for the party, and about in the kind of zero times, around the 04, 05, there was a great project of building purpose-built childcare facilities, for example. That money came from Europe. So that's something positive, but we haven't had that type of investment in a very, very long time, and I think it's important that you have the right voices over there. Myself and my colleague, we think we'll be two very strong voices arguing for things like that and bringing it back to people and communities. In relation to the gender identity question, I haven't read that report, so I'm going to be really honest, and I don't like to comment when you haven't have the detail, but I will say I do think we need a combination, you have to have compassion at the heart of this, and we need the expert views as well, and people with lived experience. And I think, like anything, when you have actual consultation with the various voices and the various groups, that's how you achieve good policy. That's how I've done my role in terms of, the early years and the childcare policy that we developed for Sinn Féin as a party. It's about talking to people, and that can change. It changes, you think you might have a good view and a good understanding of something. You talk to people working in the sector, you talk to parents, they're coming with their ideas, and policy can evolve as a result.
Okay, John.
Can I take a second issue first? I've been involved in research for many years, and any bit of research from a reputable author must be taken on board and reviewed. And in that sense, the report that you talk about clearly should be reviewed by the authorities here and engaged with. And that's all I can say, because I haven't clearly read the report. But research is vitally important, and it puts a clearer picture on things such that people can make decisions. So I certainly would say it should be considered by the authorities. Can I say, Derek, you probably came through Dunkettle on the way down here. Or you probably came somewhere on a road that was probably... That's fine, but you probably came on a road that was probably funded by Europe. I grew up in the 70s in Cork, by the way. I had a whole heap of uncles who lost their jobs in Dunlops, Varome, Fords. Why? Because Ireland actually was an economic basket case back in the 70s. I can tell you the social welfare system was not as good as the system we have today, and there are still issues that we have to address in that regard. But what I will say to you is that Fine Gael, as you call it, an establishment party, Fine Gael is a party of people. We're elected by people. We have a number of people, who vote for us, and it's quite a significant number of people, and they've successfully voted for us and for other parties here over the years. And to call us establishment is your definition. It's not my definition, because what I would say to you is that we have been net beneficiaries from Europe of about 42 billion in funding. We're now supporting countries who are much poorer than ourselves. The gross value add in this part of Europe, by the way, is ahead of Luxembourg. It's ahead of most regions across Europe. Why did that happen? It happened because Europe was good for us. Now, you might take your own little jigsaw puzzle view of Europe. And one thing I would say to you, I emigrated from this country when the economy was bad. Yeah, I came back when it started to get better. And it came back because of domestic policies, and also because Europe supported this country with funds back in the mid-90s. And what I would say to you is that I'm very proud of the fact that we have migrant workers in this country contributing tax, supporting services, unlike others who take a view against migration in a very, very black way. And I would say to you, as somebody who was a migrant and got a Céad Míle Fáilte in other countries when there were issues, when we were in bombing campaigns in the mid-90s, I can tell you I was still regarded as somebody who was contributing to the English economy. And when I came back, I certainly would say to you, the people that I've employed, whether it was in Borgosh or in the Port of Cork or whether it was in Amarenco, I absolutely am delighted that I've brought people from right across Europe and across the world to Ireland to contribute to this society. And anybody who is against that, I have to say, you call us establishment parties, I would say to you, migration is critical for the economy of this country.
Okay. Jerry, could I just respond? I didn't respond to the lady.
Sorry.
I didn't respond to the lady at the back.
I want to try and get as many questions in as possible.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I thought there was going to be a second round on your question. I do apologise. I absolutely support gender identity rights, and as a mediator, I absolutely espouse and live by all open dialogue, collaboration, listening to both sides, hearing both sides, and coming collectively and supportively and in a very, very empathetic way to an understanding and a reasoning.
Okay, yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for attending today. Speeches. My name is Kamal, I'm from Wexford. I have two questions, one for Grace and one for John. Grace, can you tell us your perspective in terms of, you mentioned you're a lawbreaker in the past and now you're a lawmaker. Can you tell us what goes on behind the closed doors in Europe in terms of policy or decision negotiation? And for John, can you tell us about your plan or vision? How are you going to balance attracting foreign investments and the issue of foreign policy, in particular the issue of peace?
No.
Okay.
Go ahead, right?
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Kamala. It's a really interesting question because I sat on this panel in 2019 as someone who was hoping to get elected, and I suppose having spent 5 years in the European Parliament, Deirdre spent a lot more than I have, but you really realise that it is a very complex set of institutions trying to come up with the best legislation in a cooperative way for the people of the citizens of Europe and beyond, because we have so many different trade deals and different negotiations and support for other countries. But so the thing is that the Commission, European Commission, which is made up of they are appointed commissioners, 27 of them, to the European Union. So in our case, in Ireland, we have Mairead McGuinness, who is the Irish Commissioner. And the Commission, it's called a College of Commissioners, and they sit together and they initiate the legislation. But before the legislation comes into the Parliament, it's gone through an impact assessment. And that's where stakeholders from across the European Union can have input to the legislation. Comes into us, the 705 members of the European Parliament, democratically elected across our different member states. And then we are set up in different groups. So I'm in the Greens, EPP, EPP is John's group, Renew, and then the left, Sinn Féin. And then we go meet in committees, as they do up in Leinster House, and we bring experts in to advise us and to look at it, and then we thrash out the legislation. You've no idea. We go through months and months and years. That's why we have a 5-year term, to make sure that the legislation that passes will work. So it's really, and we go through the Green Group. We always look. We look at it from a gender perspective. We look at the legislation from a climate perspective. We look at the legislation from a social justice perspective. So we have a set of criteria, and then the legislation finally goes for the vote. Then you have, and this is really important because the parliamentarians and the European Council, which is the heads of the member states and the government ministers, then we're the co-legislators. So we debate it in what they call the trilogues. We thrash it out even further. And by the time that the legislation gets through, it should be fairly ready to work for all members. So they're the three institutions. It's our workplace is Brussels and Strasbourg. It's a long way from home. I'd rather sit behind my computer and to do the voting, but I'm hoping that ICT here in SETU here in will come up with some kind of a fingerprinting system, so we don't have to spend all our time travelling, because we lose a lot of time travelling, even though you can study on the way. So it is complex, but it is, remember, it's 27 distinctly different member states, and in order to get the best out of it in terms of regulation, legislation, there's that very, very rigorous, and as Kathleen used the word, scrutiny process to make sure that we get the best outcomes.
Thanks, Grace.
Yeah, Kamal, thank you for your question, and you're very much welcome to this debate. And what I will say is that foreign direct investment, going back to what I said about the 1970s, has been extremely progressive in Ireland over a long period of time. And it's not just US multinationals. We have a lot of German, French, Japanese multinationals right across this country. And I would say to you that I don't believe that foreign direct investment in Ireland will stop because we have a particular attitude to Palestine. Frankly, I think there's a lot of people in the United States, because I've worked and travelled there extensively, frankly, share that view in terms of actually recognising Palestine as a state. And the sooner that happens, the better. Clearly, the escalation of the war within the region is worrying, not just for Palestine, but for a lot of other countries, like Jordan, where we, as I said earlier, we have an office, in Egypt, where we have an office as well. I would really be concerned about that escalation. But Ireland's attitude towards Palestine has been consistent for many, many years. And what I would say to you is that I'm very proud of the fact that Grace's leader, Eamon, Cynthia's leader, Micheál, and our new leader, Simon Harris, are at one in the context of looking at the Palestinian issue. And frankly, I don't think American multinationals who have been successful here, and those who are interested in coming here, Kamal, They're not coming here because of our foreign policy. They're coming here because of institutions like this that produce great engineers, great business people, great life scientists. They're coming here because we have, yes, a tax code that's harmonising, but we have a track record of great research and a track record of great employees. And we also, going back to my point, we now actually have a more cosmopolitan employee base, not just Irish people. If you go to the Tyndall Research Centre, where I was a board director for 10 years back at UCC, 60% of the researchers are not Irish. They're from all over the world. Exactly. So can I just say, I'm very happy to say that I believe that FDI will be steadfast, but we need to be steadfast with the Palestinian nation. But I would also say, I would hope that the hostages are released as quickly as possible. We have a ceasefire, and that the routes are opened so that humanitarian aid can go into the starving children of Gaza as quickly as possible.
Sorry, could I just speak to the point that Grace spoke about? The importance of Europe. It is so important now more than ever because of the instability that we've all spoken about. Europe really matters. Fianna Fáil is a pro-European party. Some of the candidates running in this election, and in particular the left and Sinn Féin, they're not as pro-European as we are. They have a diffident, a sort of an indifferent view to Europe. So it's very important that we all understand that Europe is so important. And I'll give you two examples to this gentleman who asked the question, what do you really do out there? There's two things that are coming out the tracks that I really want to get my teeth into if and when I get elected. One is the protection of women. So there's an EU directive that has come on stream in the last year or two to protect women across the EU in every member state in the same fashion and form so that it's uniform. And this is not just protection from the usual domestic violence, which can't be tolerated any longer, but it's all forms of violence, together with cyberbullying and together with illegal sharing of images. That's one very practical result of Europe meaning and making things matter. Number two is there is a directive that has just come on stream also, and that is a directive in relation to all the tech giants, and the media directive is going to actively regulate and hopefully prosecute the tech giants so that our young children, and I'm talking about minors and particularly under 12-year-olds, that it will be properly regulated, the content that they can see on their little smartphones, or worse again, on their little gaming consoles. So that's the type of legislation that has been discussed, as Grace has described, with a fine-tooth comb in Europe. A directive has been produced, and now the member states like Ireland have been requested to take that directive on board and to enact our own law, which we did in 2024 in relation to the Digital Services Act. So it's very practical problems that require solutions to bring them back home, and that's why Europe matters so much.
Yeah, no, just to respond to the point in relation to Sinn Féin and Europe. So first of all, I think it would be a bit ridiculous for me to be here today asking for your vote running for the European election if we were anti-European. I think that would be a bit of a stupid situation for me to be in. We have a very proud track record, and just because you question or criticise or want to look into or want further information, it doesn't mean that you're anti-European. It means that you have the right agenda and that you have what actually matters to people and people's interests at heart. You know, our own party leader, Mary Lou MacDonald, was an MEP for many years as well. So we have a very proud track record. Leonie Rida was successful in getting the Irish language recognised as a language of the European Union. So I'm very proud of our track record, and I just wanted to challenge that point.
I just want to say that every treaty that has been voted on to improve citizens in this country has been opposed by Sinn Féin. The Nice Treaty, Lisbon, I could go on and on. Every single treaty. And most recently, the important Migration Pact, which is so important at this point to get uniformity between all the member states, was voted down by Sinn Féin just for the sake of opposition, just to say no. And just to clarify, I don't believe that Kathleen or the members of Sinn Féin here actually recognise the Republic of Ireland that they're seeking a seat for, because they refer to this constituency, not Ireland South, but where we live in the Republic of Ireland. They refer to it as the 26 counties. So it is a bit disingenuous, I believe, for Kathleen or for Sinn Féin or candidates like the other Sinn Féin candidates to be running and saying they will represent the Republic of Ireland when they don't even recognise that legal and constitutional entity.
You have to let me come back on that.
Just very briefly, I want to...
It'll be the final point, just if I can respond.
I want to accommodate more students coming in.
Okay, we're here as well, media.
Yeah, that's fine as well, of course. Yeah. Yeah, Kathleen, if you want to respond first.
Yeah. Just to say, first of all, yes, we call this the 26 counties. We are for a united Ireland. I would be surprised if anyone is shocked by that. That's always been one of our ultimate objectives. And we have had various good reasons just to oppose European treaties over the years, and we make absolutely no apologies for that. In relation to the pact that was mentioned, the Migration Pact, we supported 2 measures in that we felt were good and progressive in relation to fingerprinting, particularly in case of child trafficking, and return to country of first origin. And there might be more questions on that, so we can get into more detail. But we believe that it's very important for the Irish government to have the final say in relation to our policies on migration, and that's why we didn't fully support all measures.
Sorry,
Derek,
Derek, there's the students and there's media. You've had a question already. So
yeah, but I didn't get a follow-up. The point I made
yes,
was...
I'm just trying to accommodate as many questions as possible.
The failures
Derek,
are
just
seen
because
by
you
the
didn't
public.
get the answer that you want,
No, you didn't answer it. None of you answered the question.
just because you don't like the answer, I think you're very unfair to other people who are here to ask questions too.
Making are viewed by the public. Alright, and why would one of ye candidates do any better going forward? That was the point I made, and none of you answered that question. I just like to.
Well, the answer, Derek, will be in the polls.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll see it. We'll see exactly where it's at then.
Okay.
Why wasn't I up there today, John?
I don't know. I'm not involved. I'm not involved in the organisation of this. I'm just a member.
Aren't you, John?
I'm just a member of the panel. What's that?
Oh yeah.
What's
You're all
that?
for democracy, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Sorry, would you like to answer?
I'm a candidate.
Sorry, I'm moving
Why
on.
aren't I up there today?
I can't explain.
Yeah.
Actually, why is he not up here today?
There
Okay.
you go. Thank you. Thank you.
No, well, I was the one who organised this.
Okay, why?
I tried to have a balance of sitting MEPs and new candidates.
You've got establishment parties up at the front. The Irish people
Can
are
I
sick
answer
to
the
death
question
of what's
that's
going
asked,
on in this
please?
country.
Can I answer the
The
question
Irish
that's...
people are sick to death of what's going on in this country, and you drag up 4 establishment candidates,
Thank you.
right, to represent Ireland South. This is a joke. This is not democratic at all.
People get a mandate.
Okay.
Okay, I do want to accommodate as many students as possible, so Robert, go ahead.
Hiya, my name is Robert Wentz and I'm a student here in Waterford. Funny enough, I surf in Moore as well. I just had a question for John and Grace there. I was just curious of, with such an emphasis on financials and GDP these days, how do you prioritise sustainability? Because you both spoke about it. I'm just wondering how do you strike the right balance?
Yeah. What I will say to you is that I'll give you a real example. Okay, so gas prices are at a high. They were much higher when the Ukrainian invasion started, but they're 5 times higher now as they were in 2019. So electricity prices haven't gone back in any shape or form. We're very much dependent in Ireland, for example, on gas generation. Really now is moving towards a backup. But what I can tell you is that onshore wind, offshore wind and solar power are cheaper than gas powered electricity. So an example of sustainability making sense is actually the fact that electricity is cheaper now from renewable sources. And now with the conflict in the Middle East, we could well see oil and gas prices going upwards again. So the acceleration of investment in renewable energy is a national priority, and it's also a matter of national security. Another example, by the way, is electric vehicles. Electric vehicles over their asset life are much cheaper to run, particularly if you can run them, off electricity at decent prices, because you're not at the issue of diesel and petrol prices going through the roof. But more importantly, you're doing something for the environment. And one of the things I want to raise is that we're not investing in public EV charging quickly enough, because we're now seeing a decline in electric vehicles and hybrids actually being purchased. So sustainability, as I know myself, because I started a business in 2013 and we've invested €1 billion across Europe in solar power and in battery charging. The reality is that has happened because gas prices and oil prices have actually gone too high.
Okay, yourself?
Sorry, I was going to.
Yeah.
You
Okay,
wanted,
sorry.
Robert. Thanks. In 2019, when I stood on this platform, form, my top priority was energy security. So in terms of sustainability. So over the last number of years, we have managed to get finally the legislation in place and the regulatory body to start the process of developing offshore renewable energy. Now, if I can just say, because people will often ask me, you know, but you're going to be putting these big things up in the sea and the damage it'll do. We're also working on marine protected areas. And we're also, I can tell you, from my own colleagues in the European Parliament, like from Denmark and places like that, they're asking why it's taken us so long. Like the wind capital of Europe, why is it taking us so long? And what the research is showing, that now there's different types of offshore renewable that will be available to us. But one said the standing platforms, the fixed platforms they call them, they are becoming artificial reefs. So they're actually sustaining little nursery grounds and that within the areas where they're being put up. So we finally have the regulatory body, MARA, who will ensure that whatever development takes place is done within the frameworks, regulations, to ensure that it gives us, Ireland, the energy security that we've been fighting for a long, long time. So once again, I just think we have such huge opportunity. I'm out on the ground, I'm meeting farmers who've put in solar, I'm meeting communities who've put in wind over time. I think we can do much, much better, and that's why I want to push the regulation in that regard, but all the time making sure that we do it in the right way, that we prioritise community energy, so it's not just the big companies that are doing best, but that it's fairly distributed. And then the beauty is we can bring the energy cost down and we'll be energy secure.
Through the chair, just to say that the other security that is vital is obviously food security. And again, if we look at the Just Transition Fund that has been rolled out by Europe, we can see that Europe is equally concerned to secure food security and to ensure it for our farmers. But at this stage, with our farmers under so much of a deluge, with red tape and with directive upon directive, there needs to be a pausing. But again, this is the balanced approach that the EU takes, and this is what the centrist party that I will belong to if I'm successful, such as ALDE and Renew, this is what they promote. It's sustainability, but if it's a rollout of directives whereby farmers have a roadmap to obviously green the farming industry, there's got to be incentives as well. All our partners, all our community members have to be brought along. So we can't have all stick for the farmers or small business who are suffering at the moment. There's got to be carrot as well. And we have had sustainable features.
Affordable carrots, not all those brought in from abroad.
Well,
locally produced.
Locally
produced.
Except we don't want to wake up one day. We don't want to wake up one day in Ireland South and realise that the farming community, the backbone of this region, is not sustainable. Nobody's taking over farms because there's no succession rate. We don't want that, because then our food supply will be threatened.
Okay, I'm just conscious of time. I know that there's another event that the candidates have to go to, so we're going to take two questions together. So up here and then over here. Yeah.
Thanks. Hi everyone. First of all, I want to say thanks first to Jerry for organising this, and thanks to the candidates for attending. My name is Killian Mangan, and I'm running in the local elections under Rawata, Party for Workers and Carers. A huge focus of my local campaign is to push to fix the local democratic deficit by reforming local government in order to ensure we actually elect the executive instead of them just being appointed by national government. And I see a very similar democratic deficit in the EU with the EU Commission. We've heard before about a directly elected president, but that would automatically give most power to a few huge EU countries and would concentrate power in one individual. So with this in mind, what are your views on reforming the EU to just have a government composed of elected MEPs in a cabinet or committee system as we have at national level in basically every European country?
Okay, thank you. John?
Hi, thanks Jerry, and thanks to the candidates for attending. My name is John Casey. I'm on academic faculty of the business. I suppose one of the things I've heard quite a lot about from all the candidates is around climate and sustainability and so on. And I guess my question is around, I suppose, what I would consider maybe a little bit of an implementation gap at EU level insofar as we've had the EU Green Deal, a brilliant initiative that set really ambitious targets that some might consider to be ambitious. And yet there seems to be, I suppose, a gap then between what happens at EU, and I guess the EU Green Deal is not the example, but there seems to be a gap between what happens at the Parliament and then what happens on the ground in Ireland from an implementation perspective. And I'd be interested in getting your perspective on that. Why, for example, do many of the EU initiatives kind of fall short when it comes to our national politics?
And then finally here.
Yeah, my name is Senthil. I'm living in Waterford for the past 25 years. Just want to know, actually, there's a 1951 convention, refugees convention actually at the moment. And if you are selected, what you are going, if you are elected, what you are going to do, what you are going to talk about the refugees in Ireland. And also one more question to John Mullins actually. So you're doing plenty of businesses at the moment actually. So how do you have the time to do service for the people actually? Can you just tell me please? Thank you.
Okay, so there's 3 big questions there and 4 candidates. So I would ask you to kind of try and be as concise as possible because I'm conscious of time as well. So John, if you want to.
Well, first off, I'm exiting the business, by the way, just to let you know. And I made that decision last November. So I'm exiting the business. So I'll be completely free to take up this role 110% of my time. So just to make sure you understand that, can I just say in terms of refugees, I mean it's a topical issue that is coming up, but people believe that it's actually the number one issue. It's not the number one issue. But what I would say to you is that with respect to international protection, yes, we have a number of what we call now safe countries, which actually will speed up the process of dealing with people who have come to ports and airports. I believe that we need to do that in a 60-day period. I think it's better that people have certainty in terms of that particular process, and the quicker we do that, the better. If people are coming from countries where they are under persecution, yes, they should be protected, and we should give them the benefit of all that protection and give them, as I said earlier, a céad míle fáilte. That's really, really important. Those who are coming here on a sort of an economic basis and maybe not on the basis of persecution, regrettably they have to go. It's no different if I went to the United States on a similar basis, that would happen as well. And just in terms of the Green Deal, can I just say that we have challenges now with the Climate Action Plan is in place up to 2030. Some of the items there, and I refer to electric vehicles, the expectation is that we'll have 800,000 electric vehicles by 2030. I can't see that happening unless we have an accelerated rollout of EV charging. I don't think we're hitting 8,000 hectares of forestry every year. I'm in the renewable energy sector. I've been involved in getting from 0 to 46% in this country over the last 30 years. The reality, getting from 46 to 80% by 2030 is going to be a real challenge. And what I would say is that we could end up by the end of 2030 handing money across to our European neighbours because we haven't met each of those, and there's many more, by the way, retrofits, etc., that we have to meet. And this, finally, by the way, on the European Commission, I think your question is very well made. My problem with that is that we come from a small country, with a very small level of population. If we're elected, we're 14 MEPs. Yeah. There is no way, in my view, that we'll have Irish influence at that particular level, and we would lose, in my view, the opportunity to have a commissioner. And I think it's really important that this country retains a commissioner. So I'm for the status quo purely because of the importance that we actually protect that particular office for ourselves.
Okay, Kathleen.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, to your question, I agree in terms of when people are democratically elected, it's always a better situation. We have a mayoral election, for example, in Limerick on the same day as well as the European and locals, which will see that person being actually democratically elected, unlike what we have currently. And I would have been on the old borough council in Kilkenny, and that would have had a lot more powers, let's say, than we would have seen after 2014. I don't know if it's as straightforward at a European level, but I think it's definitely something that should be explored and looked at and see how it would work, particularly for the smaller nations. But I do agree with the principle of, yeah, obviously when people are democratically elected, they have a mandate from the people, and that does change the situation. In relation to the specific question on climate and the sort of disconnect, I think a lot of the time that certain things that are coming down, they're not necessarily working for ordinary people. So I think if you were to ask anyone who drives, they would love to be able to have an electric car. They would love to be able to play their part. It's not affordable. So we can't just keep saying to people, you need to do this, you need to change your pattern of behaviour and everything. A lot of people want to do that. They can't afford to do it. A lot of people would love to upgrade their own homes, their boilers, the newer kind of heating systems. It's not something that's affordable, and we do need to really look at energy poverty and how we actually bring people with us. And then the other thing in relation to climate is the larger polluters, such as some of the chemical industries and the data centres, need to be looked at in terms of playing their fair share, because we hear very little about them, and they account for a huge amount of the emissions. And in relation to the question on the refugee situation, I think the situation is not working currently for anybody, but I don't think that's just in the last year or two. I think that's since we've created direct provision. It has never worked. We know we've literally kind of farmed people away, some people with fantastic skills that we badly need in this country, and literally, locked them away. So it is not. We need a fair system. It definitely needs to be fair, and I think that's where some of the frustration comes from people. And I think we need a system that's efficient. But I also do think we know how much we are crying out for so many different skills in this country, and we need to marry the two up. That's where the lack of common sense in politics frustrates me so much at times. And I just want to say as well that we have a huge amount of people working, particularly in our health industry. I had reason to be in the hospital sector a lot before Christmas. My own dad had a stroke, and every single person that treated him was not from this country. So we have a huge, it's a fantastic role that people are playing. I think it needs to be fair, and it needs to be efficient, and it needs to be enforceable, and that's what people want.
So I'm going to diverge now from my neighbour here, John, because I do not agree that the status quo is serving us. So I would be very much open to considerations of different ways of doing things. But definitely status quo is bringing us, it's the race to the bottom. And then just John, in terms of yours, and I diverge again, because the big problem with the situation in the European Parliament at the moment is the EPP party, which Fine Gael is part of. And I'm sorry to say this, but it has to be said. Ursula von der Leyen, the president, the new strategy is pushing back on everything we've done over the last 5 years. So I want to try to get back in there to drive home the good legislation that we've put in place and have it implemented. And it's all about implementation now, because we do have the structure, we have the legislation on loads of the climate biodiversity areas, the Green Deal, circularity, I could go on about. But if we don't implement that, we've essentially wasted time. So I will fight tooth and nail against what the EPP are doing at the moment in a drive to the bottom.
We agreed to plan domestically, Grace, to be fair, in government. So,
but we need nationally as well. I mean, we have our TDs here who are pushing the climate law. There's no doubt about it. But on the European level, that's where it happens. And that if they push back, then we are going to lose another decade. And so I am against the status quo, and I'm for transformative change.
I'm for the status quo because I know since 1973 how much this country has benefited by its membership of the old EEC, the current European Union. We have benefited, I repeat, by 0.8 billion every year. This has affected your mums, dads, uncles, aunts, grannies, granddads. This is why we have transformed our society and our community and our economy into the level of success that we currently have. This is why we have gotten so much foreign direct investment, which is not mutually exclusive with any other green agenda or any other agenda for the benefit of the community, the benefit of the climate, the benefit of all of our populations in the EU. So it's vital that Ireland wouldn't lose out, as the point has been made correctly there by John, wouldn't lose out in terms of being around the table, being able to make decisions and have that key job as a commissioner. With regards to refugees in Ireland, Kathleen says the current system is not working. Well, Kathleen didn't vote in order to have this new EU pact brought forward and to have it agreed.
Not an MEP yet.
No, she's not, but her party,
your
her
confidence
party in the left group in the European Parliament, and this is something that she can't actually counteract, they voted against it. That's because they vote against everything. The pact is a rules-based system that will assess people at the point of entry or at the point of request of entry, and if they qualify under immigrant status, they're going to be sent on to Ireland or sent on to whatever country. If they don't, they're going to be returned. It's going to be proportionate, it's going to be fair, and there's going to be collaboration between all the EU member states, so that if Ireland reaches a quota and it can't take any more, Ireland can say, we can't take any more, we'll make a financial contribution instead to the EU. So that hasn't been worked out yet. The amount hasn't been worked out. As you know, there are 2 years. There are 2 years for the pact to be rolled out, and none of those finer points have been developed. But the key point is this: at a really crucial time, at a really crucial time in EU politics, where the far right or the extreme left seem to be on the rise, it's very important to maintain the centre. And that's where the ALDE and Renew Party are at. And they are the calm influencing force in the European Parliament in order to get all of you young people and older people with family members choices and jobs and to sustain communities in this region. And that's why it's so important to keep the status quo. And just in relation to, this gentleman's point about falling short on our national policies, the gap between what the Parliament does and then implementing here, I disagree with you, sir. And the reason I disagree is because our MEPs to date, and particularly those within the Fianna Fáil party that I've already referenced, Billy Kelleher and Barry Andrews, they actually shape the legislation along with our sitting MEP, obviously Grace, from a Green Party perspective. They shape the legislation by listening to the voters that vote them in, whether it's in Dublin or Ireland South. And they ensure that there's a transposition, and of course the EU makes sure that it's transposed in a timely fashion, of that law, such as the Digital Services Act that I spoke about, such as the Directive to Protect Women from Violence. They ensure that that is transposed and rolled out in national law. So I disagree with any disjunct between, and certainly if and when I get elected, I will ensure that communication will be key for me to stay in touch with each and every one of you voters, maybe not in person because it's a very broad area, but certainly through the use of local radio, local press, social media and all of that, so that you will see that there's no disconnect and that I'm not out there wasting a vote for you. So don't waste a vote in June.
Can I just respond just again and I just... Look, I've been in the European Parliament for 5 years. I see what's going on. And if I can just say, no disrespect, Cynthia, but we have situations where the Renew group of the two MEPs that you mentioned, who have, on particular votes, voted different ways. The Renew Party in the Parliament, I'm only saying what I've seen and what I, over the last few years, have often diverged themselves. So I'm telling you, Barry goes one way, Billy goes the other. And that's why I just say to you, would you really take a really good look at the voting system, who votes what way on different things, so that you are best informed and you know,
that's because it's a healthy. Okay. That's because it's a healthy democratic party where different views are heard and different sides are weighed up. And the whip system is obviously slightly different than national politics, but it's a good test of a democratic party. ALDE Renew is a good test, and it stands the test of a good democratic party where different views are heard, unlike other parties where only one voice is allowed.
Okay. No, sorry, we're finishing up here now. I recognise that there are actually questions from the front here and on the left, and I haven't had time to take all of the questions, so I thank you. I am conscious as well that I'm trying to close. Okay.
The public's opinion, 70%.
Public opinion will be on the 7th of June. Derek. Okay, we'll see it then.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm conscious that there is another event that the candidates have to attend. So I opened the... There was questions from left, there was questions from right, there was questions up on the right-hand side. So I was trying to accommodate as many questions as possible. I'm conscious that the candidates have another event to go to. They have given very generously of their time and tried to answer your questions as best that they can. And I opened the meeting by asking people to respect the candidates in terms of courtesy and to listen with open minds. So I thank you all for your attendance. Okay, so I'm just thanking very much everybody for, I would like to thank Grace O'Sullivan, John Mullins, Cynthia Vercu, and Kathleen Funchen. Thank you very much. And whichever way you vote, please do vote. Please do engage, inform yourselves, and be active in terms of the electoral campaign. Thank you all very much.